Hi, I'm Arthur. And if you haven't noticed, there is this kind of new kid in the pool in terms of grimdark wargaming, and this new kid is incredibly fat, making waves and shit. Trench Crusade is here, and I hope to God it stays, as it has recently been taking over my studies and distracting me from book 243 of the Horus Heresy. The lore and aesthetic of this game are crisp as fuck, and I can't not love every inch of it. I know a lot of you probably don't know completely what it is, and have only been seeing ruminations, or maybe not, because Adeptus Ridiculous just talked about it, and that's kind of a big show from what I've been told. So consider this a kind of simple to digest lore primer for the game itself. Something that if you want to know the basics of the setting in as easy a way as possible, this is going to be the video for you. Before we get into the lore, a disclaimer: I am not a history guy, which I'm told is very rare in the wargaming community. I have been told various times that Prussia is not Russia, and I don't know the difference between the two, which usually makes most of my historically inclined friends incredibly upset. But just to reaffirm, I have the brain of a mollusk, so I am not going to get most of the historical facts correct. I'm just going off of what is in the lore primer and the things that my friends have told me from just being slapped on the wrist when I say something incorrect. But in short, to get into what Trench Crusade is from a top-down perspective, Trench Crusade is an alt-history grimdark World War I skirmish grimdark wargame created by ex-Warhammer staff responsible for some of the most popular pieces of Warhammer gaming. It takes place during what is essentially World War I and is one of the most badass things I have ever seen. It's actually got what I consider the best art I've ever seen in a wargame. It started as kind of an art project, from my understanding, from Mike Francina, who I have been following for numerous years, because if you know me, I follow a lot of different games and play a lot of different settings for different things. And Magic the Gathering was one of them, and my favorite faction in Magic the Gathering is the Phyrexians. The Phyrexians had a lot of art for one of their sets done by Mike Francina, and that kind of got my attention. So I followed him on Twitter, and one day he started posting the art that you're seeing on screen for probably the majority of this video, with a small one-paragraph lore blurb for it. Now, I don't know if he made that with the intention of making a war game from the start, but it was just such a fun project, and to see that it's turned into a war game is so fun, even if it is kind of a smaller scale war game. The art style itself translates into god-tier bodied horror art, and it works so well for the ideas that are present in Trench Crusade. And with him doing the majority of the art and a bunch of other Warhammer veterans doing that, they also picked up some people who worked on Mordheim to do the gameplay of the game for the rule set itself, which, from what I've been told, is actually one of the best rule sets in Warhammer history, with writing from actual Black Library authors being made due to their successful Kickstarter, which, by the way, oh my god, the Kickstarter was incredibly successful. If you didn't see that, which of course I backed that, I put my money where my mouth is. But yeah, this game is 3D printer friendly. They even support third-party models. So I think they're off to a great start with the community they're building. But enough talking about the top-down history shit for the uninformed. Let's talk about the thing you care about, the lore. What even is a Trench Crusade? Which I'm glad you asked, because there is a lot to cover. So let's dive into the landmark year of 1099, which for the historians out there, you should recognize that as the year that marked the end of the First Crusade. You know, the Crusades, like the actual Crusades. The one to take the holy city of Jerusalem and put it back under Christian martial superiority. Christian Crusaders, did that and succeeded. But there was a discovery in this alternate history take of it. A small group of the Crusaders had found an ancient artifact that was allowing them to speak with literal demons from hell. This kind of communion corrupted them to their core and made them essentially the puppets of hell. See, with the First Crusade, as I understand it, it wasn't just a bunch of holy knights and paladins and templars. It was actually a bunch of common folk that worked alongside them, these rabbling masses of fanatics. And I like to think that those are the ones that were corrupted by this holy artifact, as they were not as devout in body and spirit. These commoners came from just people who were promised holy absolution if they were able to take back the Holy Land, and I think that is kind of interesting, but again, that's just my speculation. Basically, this act was known as the First Heresy, the bonding of the piety bias with the heretical. These heretics banded together to set in motion a plot so foul that it would shape the world of this setting itself. They would use the artifact and demonic knowledge from the demons that were speaking to them to open a gate to hell in Jerusalem and summon the forces of hell to the world above, increasing the influence of hell across the world and then starting this never-ending war between the forces of the Abrahamic religions against that of, Satan. I am going to skip the kind of in-between periods because there's a lot that came up with the technological developments and so on and so forth, and get to the stuff that's the most easy to digest rather than giving you a complete breakdown of the timeline. But I will cover a few things. See, Trench Crusade does have a few base rules that I think separates it from a lot of other war games, especially Warhammer 40k. So rule number 1, pure demons and devils cannot enter our world. It is the covenant of hell. Only monsters created, even if partially from the flesh of living creatures, can enter it, meaning hell's full might can never truly enter Earth, but that's why you'll see on the tabletop, as well as in lore, things like yoke fiends and pit locusts and a bunch of other things that look like demons, but they're not. They're actually either people that were corrupted and raised to a higher level of status, or monsters that were made in hell, like yoke fiends, that are actually kind of more related to goats than they are actual demons. So with that in mind, the full might of hell can't enter Earth, and that kind of balances the scales a little bit. There are some people who have more of a sway than others, like the one technical exception being Beelzebub. We'll get to him later, but yeah. Rule 2, no exception. Not a single one, everything can die. Plot armor does not exist. A yeoman with a shitty M1 Garand style rifle can blast the head off a praetor from the court of the seven-headed serpent. The same way an amalgamation from the Black Grail can decimate a line of Jabir. A bullet is the universal equalizer. There's some magic in the setting, but both sides of the war have magics that kinda run counter to the other. Like in lore, there are some people who get gunned down for a faction known as the Trench Pilgrims, and sometimes they get brought back from the dead by the light of one of the cloned Christ monstrosities they have chained up at the Super Vatican. We'll get into it. And on the other side, sometimes the forces of hell can just lose most of their blood and organs and still keep fighting. So unlike with something like 40k, a bullet can in fact kill a space marine quite easily. You just gotta have the right kind of bullet. There are very few exceptions to this. Sure, there are zombies, so traditional body shots won't really work on them, but in general, most people have ways to deal with everything the other people have, and there's a reason why if you build your army lists, most factions have guys that say can take any weapon from the armory. Just outfit your guys to deal with whatever problem you need to. So with that all being said, what is the modern setting of Trench Crusade? Well, the main focal point is kind of centered around Jerusalem. I'm also pretty shit at geography, but Jerusalem is kind of the main base of operation for the heretics, and not really close, but relatively close speaking is the city of New Antioch for the mostly homogenized Abrahamic, Christian, whatever religions of the day. You might be asking, why is it called New Antioch? And what is the city like? Well, for one, New Antioch is a bastion. It's basically stands a little too close to the heretic forces and essentially acts as a bulwark against the heretics, deploying troops to enter the trenches to clear out weird gibbering Satanists in order to purify the lands and make it safer. It is basically a massive walled-off city-state where Christians of all denominations have banded together for one single cause: defeating the devil's armies, which makes sense, honestly. There are separatist factions that have their own things. As I said, it's more Christians in the city of New Antioch and a bunch of their subsidiary forces, but there are other Abrahamic religions that have formed their own kind of city-states somewhere else, but we'll get to the sultanate at some point soon. There is also the Trench Pilgrims that kind of do their own thing, but the Principality of New Antioch is kind of the most standardized with modern-day rifles, modern-day armor, and oh fuck, I forgot to mention, this is basically a universe where Kevlar and flak armor was kind of overlooked due to magical metallurgist saints discovering a way to bless metals with the power of Christ. It's actually pretty common to see dudes in full plate mail gunning it through the trenches with magic broadswords and rifles, I guess. Heretic forces are similar in that they have access to the foundries of hell, making weapons that most mortals can use on the battlefields, though they are a bit riskier and are just as likely to kill the person using them as they are to actually, help them. So yeah, New Antioch kind of occupies the section of space known to be the most advanced but standard tech in the setting. The Sultanates of the Iron Wall do have probably the most esoteric and weird technology, but again, we'll cover them a little bit later in the video. But why is it called New Antioch and not just, Antioch? Well, little pagan Billy, you should learn not to ask such heretical questions, because doing so will likely get you put into the ritualistic pyres where sinners are burnt to a crisp for entertainment daily. But to answer your silly question, it's because the original city of Antioch, which was the first bastion of the faith, was fucking cursploded. Cursploded by what, you ask? We literally do not know. It just one day was destroyed and turned into a crater like it was hit by a nuke, and we do not know what hellish weapon did it, but we do know that it was never used again. Outside of the basics, New Antioch is kept running by tithes and conscriptions of noble houses as well as commoners, taking in supplies, men, and just raiding forces to get as much land as humanly possible in order to keep their forces fed and equipped. The bulk of their forces are made up of soldiers known as yeomen, whichever, who can be equipped with literally anything and everything, but my favorite aesthetically has to either be the shock troopers or the heavy mechanized infantry. Shock troopers are the unmarried noble sons with a high capacity for violence, who are given the best armor and weapons, then sent into trenches on a fuckload of stimulant chemicals, likely with Sabaton blasting through their AirPods as they begin to cleave fucking heretics in half. And the heavy mechanized infantry are elite soldiers, with their bodies being pushed to their limits due to chemical enhancements being used to make them be able to move the armor itself. These individuals are allowed to don the power armor of the setting, which honestly is incredibly aesthetic. It's very diesel punk. It's probably my favorite power armor aesthetically in fiction just because of how simple it looks. It's super chunky, and the only piece of art that we have is this one, where they're operating what is, I guess, just like a heavy machine gun or just a regular machine gun. But we do actually have miniatures for other variants, like one with a lucerne hammer in one hand and a tower shield in the other, which is fucking cool. So with what is essentially the Ultramarines of the setting out of the way, let's cover the two offshoots that, although are parts of the Abrahamic religions fighting the forces of Satan, they do have completely different motivations to some degree to why they're doing what they're doing. But first, I want to shout out Glue Boy really quickly, because bro is basically just the West Hammer of Trench Crusade right now. Glue Boy, if you don't remember, was one of the fellas who was on the 40k mega collab thingy that I did a while back. And I kind of kept tabs on a lot of the people that were involved in that because, well, I discovered a lot of channels through it. And this dude did a bit of a hard pivot into the lovely landscape that is Trench Crusade, while still also covering a bit of 40k from time to time. His Trench Crusade stuff is a godsend. Quite literally, all of it is digestible, very casual, and also, just he has a lot of personality. So if you want to learn more about Trench Crusade outside of this video, let me know, because I might make more videos myself. But before I even make videos, if you want to know more immediately, check out Glue Boy's channel. His channel is going to be in the description of this video, and I might even pin a comment just to kind of push that ahead. His channel is super undersubscribed for the quality that he puts out there and the passion he shows for the hobby. So, support the boy, If you like Trench Crusade, check him out. If you like 40k, check him out. So with that in mind, in his honor, I'm going to cover his favorite faction next, which is the Sultanate of the Iron Wall. These fine lads and ladesses fighting the good fight in a different way than the forces of New Antioch. See, where New Antioch are kind of the traditional Christians, albeit homogenized, the forces of the Sultanate are actually what happened to the many Muslims of the world. They have signed various treaties with New Antioch in order to get them to agree on the single topic that is maybe dealing with the forces of literal hell is kind of more important than any grievances we have with each other, though this doesn't necessarily mean that they get along. They do, in fact, see the majority of the forces of New Antioch as infidels who are the main reason for the forces of hell coming to the world. First heresy was kind of done by Christian Crusaders is kind of a thing, which, although is patently correct, which is something they've decided to kind of look over until the war with hell is over, and then they decide that if that's a hill worth dying on. Sultanate of the Iron Wall isn't just a title. See, they have created their own impenetrable city-state with a massive great city where, by using their more esoteric technologies as well as their abilities to create literal alchemical monsters, they weirdly enough have a quality of life that either rivals or surpasses that of New Antioch, though this comes at the cost of them being a reclusive city. Other Muslims and members of the Sultan's army can enter or leave at any time. Very rarely can anyone else enter. In terms of the battlefield and why they are one of the more powerful forces to deal with is where the armies of New Antioch have this propensity to standardize their equipment, meaning their advancements compound upon each other and try to get as close to mass production as humanly possible for the sake of ease and distribution. Like, how do I put this? An example is one dude would find a way to bless a new type of metal that makes it stronger, more durable, and more likely to kill a hell guy of some sort. Then some other engineer finds a way to mass produce this metal in a foundry of some sort, and then an engineer will find a way to turn that into an armor, and then that kind of compounds upon itself for the next guy to study that armor and make it better. In the Sultanate, it's more like, I have opened my third eye and gazed into the endless infinity that is the universe's gaping maw. The universe bore witness to the naked splendor of my soul, found me worthy, and gave me the ability to make double-aught buckshot for my war crime sticks. And if you ever share in a way that is direct with someone else how to make it, you will wither away to ash or some shit. See, their technology is less technology and more hyper-specialized biomancy. The alchemists of the Iron Wall create literal monsters, the likes of which are kind of impossible to fully tell, so here's the Lion of Jabir. It is one of the more useful things that they tend to create there. They are fully artificial organic creatures that have to have their sense of self neutered, or they become incredibly depressed and existential due to them realizing what exactly they are. These things are literally so dangerous that they are essentially the shock troops of the Sultanate, sent in to just break holes in lines so that people can break in, and it's kind of hard to put them down once they're in there. And for context, the Sultan has an army of these goddamn things, about 77 strong, which is kind of cool to think about that you could just mass these. And if you think that the Lions of Jabir are cool, wait till you see the goddamn brazen bull. I don't know what to say. It's literally just the coolest thing ever. Just look at this. Now to get back to Glue Boy, the thing he loves best about the Sultanate, and the thing I find pretty up there in terms of intrigue as well, other than the biomonsters, is the assassins, who, not to step on Glue Boy's toes, they are fed a diet of bitter poisons from a young age to the point where their blood is toxic, which they are often exsanguinated ritualistically, the blood collected and then condensed into iron, making highly toxic blood iron magic daggers that the same assassin uses in battle. They have hallucinogen-laced smoke and time manipulation abilities. They're just cool, and I'm not going to cover them as much as I could because Glue Boy covered them a lot in his videos, and I think you should go look them up as well because they're pretty fun as a faction. In the game, there's actually alternate ways to run certain armies, and for the Sultanate, you can actually run it as an assassin's cabal. Think Assassin's Creed, which is one of the cool reasons why you'd play them, because they do have like that Assassin's Creed 1 vibe, where normally you're only allowed one assassin per army because they are very, very dangerous. But if you run this specific way of playing it, you can't have any of the heavy shock troops or what have you, but you can have 3 assassins, which is pretty powerful from what I've been seeing. So, enough of that. Let's get to the last of the Abrahamic sub-factions, and I just have to say, or rather I have to ask, what if Black Templars, Sisters of Battle, and Chaos Cultists all in one? Well, congrats, the Trench Pilgrims are just that. Roving gangs of pilgrims who are on a specific mission, either actually sent to them by God, or believed to be sent to them by God, which at this point might as well be the same thing. The Trench Pilgrims, although usually congregating in New Antioch, are often in no man's land looking for heretics to strap to various torture devices and maim. They have more rudimentary equipment than that of the forces of New Antioch, but in all honesty, they don't need much. Preferring to do things the old-fashioned way, swords, shields, and also giant walker mechs that double as a penitent engine. But like, those are just more rudimentary versions of the heavy mech infantry, just bigger and scarier. These fellas specialize in listening to the word of God and killing anything that they think isn't faithful enough. They may only have the shittiest rifles and a bunch of rusty clubs and swords, but by God, they are going to make you learn to speak English with both of those weapons inside of your fucking mouth. They are fucking brutal, but they have access to some of the most metal shit out there. Like the weird metal caps they have on their head, which, okay. So, like, I'm uncultured, and I'm bad at pronouncing anything. I grew up in a portion of Canada that didn't learn French that often, and the French that we did learn was of a dialect that most of you don't even know exists. So, when it comes to saying I can't pronounce things that are of a very esoteric accent, you kind of get what I mean. So when I read what this thing was called, well, I was reading the lore primer and the notes in the actual rulebook, I thought it was pronounced capirote. But no, the tall conical helmets are actually pronounced capirote, and when wearing these, there is sort of a mental metamorphosis that happens. It's an on-the-battlefield phenomena where even the lowliest commoner, if he wears the capirote of the trench pilgrims, their faith gets amplified to such a significant degree that they no longer have the concept of fear built into them. They will face anything no matter what it is, which is actually represented in game, where if you have a duder on the battlefield who has a capirote on his head, he actually is no longer affected by the fear rule, which means he can no longer be frightened by anything, which is kind of cute. They also have access to communicants, which are, okay, so we're gonna have to go back a little bit here. You know how I mentioned that they tried to clone Jesus Christ, and thus we have him kind of chained up at the Super Vatican? Yeah, we did that a few times, because I mean, who is likely going to be the best weapon against the devil other than multiple Jesuses? So these are the Metachrist. They are one of the most useful tools that we have in order to combat the forces of Satan. Now, some of the trench pilgrims and some members of New Antioch see the Metachrist as heresy, and some just see them as one of God's miracles. Communicants are more towards the latter on both ends for New Antioch and the trench pilgrims, because they go through a process known as communion, where they actually consume the flesh of the Metachrist and are now swollen with holy might. They grow larger, stronger, faster, smarter, though sometimes there are weird side effects. Now, I did find kind of conflicting information about this, so feel free to call me on this, but each Metachrist has a different kind of theme to them, and they have a different subsection of abilities, so depending on which communion you partake in with which Metachrist, you get a different set of abilities, leading to one communicant becoming like a tank hunter, and another becoming the trench pilgrim communicant, which is just buff, has no eyes, and has a cross nailed into its face, but is big as shit. So the trench pilgrim communicants are often the biggest, the buffest, and the most regenerative of all the communicants, and they are often incredibly pious, more so than anybody else. With the forces of the faithful out of the way, and you kind of understand their shtick, who do we have next? The Heretic Legions and the forces of Satan. So starting off, we have the Heretic Legions of the forces of Satan. See, these guys are necessary because, as I mentioned, true demons cannot set foot on Earth due to the covenant of hell. Thus, humans and animals are often used to great effect on the battlefield. There is a certain ritual that if you are going to serve in the Heretic Legions, you do kind of have to conduct it with very rare outliers, but we'll cover the wretches in a second. This is for the standard troopers, the legionaries, the random anointed guys, so on and so forth. And in order to do this, you need to prove that you are a damned soul. So to do that, you have to actually go to the gates of hell itself, witness them, and then survive. If you have not the chops to be a damned soul, you just die. But if you don't, your soul is permanently damned to hell forever, and you cannot actually, go back. Now, you gain certain blessings from it, but not many if you just walk away there. Now, there are some people whom are a little bit worse, and if they walk into the gates of hell, they have, I believe, a very high percentage chance of just outright dying and burning to death. But if they're able to enter a layer of hell and actually walk into hell, they become what is called an anointed. Anointeds are one of the most dangerous things to find on the battlefield. Their skin scorched black by the permanent burns that will never heal, but they are cast in this hellish iron armor that will basically protect them from most harm, and their bodies are swollen with power. Think of them kind of similar to like a lesser version of a communicant. They're not nearly as strong as a communicant, but they are pretty powerful. Think of them actually more on par with like the heavy mechanized infantry of New Antioch. That's kind of what tier they're at, and they usually carry some of the heaviest weapons out there. But one of my favorite parts of the Heretic legions, the regular guys who are manipulated by the forces of hell, are the wretches. These fellas are usually just prisoners, stolen from the faithful, or just some unfortunates that were found in the middle of no man's land raising a farm or something during raids. The wretches are used as slaves prior to them becoming wretches, and if the wretch wishes to seek their freedom at any cost, they can actually volunteer to fight in the war for hell. If they do so, they basically can earn their freedom. Now you might think, oh, they're just going to kill them anyway. No, because as weird as it is to say, hell actually is more lawful and bound by certain codes and rules than that of the forces of the faithful. You will always be abiding these rules, but as long as you follow them, you will get what is coming to you. So the rule of hell is that if you prove yourself and provide a service to hell, you will be rewarded. So with wretches, they're told if they accomplish a great deed in combat on the battlefield, they are free to go wherever they want. This is actually represented in game, where you can actually have a wretch fight someone. They cost almost nothing to play with them. And if they kill an elite member of the opposing army, you lose that wretch. They are no longer in your army roster because they earn their freedom and they just haul ass. Doesn't matter if they did a good job, they just leave. And I think that's so fun. Hell also has a bunch of monsters that serve alongside its standard troops, but as they have the main goal of corrupting pretty much the whole world and usher in the true and blue apocalypse. See, hell cannot send demons, but they can send monsters they make in hell. So you have stuff like werewolves made from hell's genetic laboratories and affixed with metal plates just so that they can cut through barbed wire. You have artillery witches, which we don't even know what they are, but they just throw small bombs at everything. In terms of tech, heretic troopers don't have much. They usually rely more on magical bullshit, which makes their stuff less predictable, but less stable to use, as it were. And I think that kind of balances them off with the stability of New Antioch. You make up for their lack of good tech with monsters and shit, you know? Speaking of monsters, there are two offshoots to the Heretic legions we need to cover before I'm out. So, before we do, just want to have a brief intermission. Hi guys, gals, pals of all persuasions. I like putting these little intermissions in after the fact, and to pull back the veil a little bit, I actually record them after the initial video is completely edited and more or less done. My process is kind of shitty, but to keep myself from getting burnt out and to keep the ADHD brainworms in my brain satisfied, I edit my videos in 10 to 20 minute bursts. These little segments make it easier for me to piece it all together at the end and make it easier for me to get done in general. Most of my videos nowadays are handled by my editor Alice, so that I can actually, get other things done, and my god, she's a godsend for this. I still usually do these intermissions myself, though, as you could probably tell by the drop in quality and the constant shilling of products and shit. Cough cough. Buy Gamer Subs, by the way. Gamer Subs is pretty fire, and Crusade has been kind of the perfect thing for me lately, especially with the topic of this video. I'm not gonna do a full-ass ad this time. I just wanted to get it in, as Gamer Subs legit has been one of the only reasons I can get this video done. On the 11th hour, quite literally, I have to pack the second I'm done recording this audio right now to get on my bus to get to the airport so that I can, get to LVO. But Gamer Subs actually does a lot of drops, and because of that, I kind of want to promote them again. Gamer Subs legit tends to drop a lot of product all the time. Like, if you go on their page right now, you'll probably see something new. They have a lot of dope-ass drops coming pretty much the entirety of this month that I know about but can't share. And if you go there and use code BONEZONE to check out anything, you get 10% off your purchase, as well as you support me, my channel, and show that you guys listen to me. So pick up some Crusaderade if you like Trench Crusade. It's pretty good. besides that, I just want to say, I really hope you guys like the Trench Crusade content I got cooking. I love this setting, and taking a break from 40k bullshit is actually really nice. I do want to branch into more content other than 40k, but I'm not gonna turn my back on something that I am quite passionate about. Trench Crusade has taken up a lot of my life just because, like, I don't know, I just really like the way that the setting is laid out. There is just so much I'm not getting into, and because of that, it means that I have so much stuff I can talk about over the next couple months. I haven't even gotten into the Scottish shock troops who do literally everything in their power to maim, murder, and burn heretics on sight, or the Irish forces who use their best soldiers as fill-in for resource tithes because they're that good that the forces of New Antioch actually accept that. It's so fucking awesome. Either way, just let me know what you think about the Trench Crusade content. Also do the gamer sub stuff. Intermission over. Let's get back to, demons, I guess? With that out of the way, let's talk demons. Or as close to demons as we can get without the forces of hell sending out copyright abuse notifications involving their likeness. The Court of the Seven-Headed Serpent is a really fun faction because, well, if you want to throw subtlety to the wind and you just say fuck it and go all out with sending literal monsters on the battlefield, that's kind of what their vibe is. The Court of the Seven-Headed Serpent is pretty damn visceral. The last two factions in general kind of are, actually. But the many different units and miniatures from this specific faction are named so stupidly, but so simply that it actually is kind of funny. See this guy right here? See how fucking crazy this is? You know what this is called? Sorcerer. Not demon sorcerer, just sorcerer. I feel there's a lot more going on here than just sorcerer, but whatever. Most of the forces of true hell are kind of like that. But who are the Court of the Seven-Headed Serpent, and kind of like how are they broken down? Well, right at the top of most of the hellish factions, you do have a demon in charge. The Heretic legions technically report to the 66 Generals of Hell. The 66 Generals of Hell, I believe, report to the Court. The Court of the Seven-Headed Serpent is the highest-ranking 7 demons in Hell, one for each major sin. They command the demons of Hell to make creatures that can go topside to deal with whatever threat they find. I think this is pretty fucking awesome because you have all these weird mutant abominations and whatever the sorcerers are just going out into the world and trying to seem like they're a coherent warband. They also have access to quite literally the worst tech in the game, using actual blunderbusses while other people are using, I don't know, bolt action rifles and even automatic rifles in the modern day. But the thing that kind of sets them apart is they have the most esoteric magical bullshit, which I think is just fucking astounding. Where my boys in New Antioch are running around with Browning 1919s, you got some half demon, half goat man from the pits of hell running around with a literal arquebus. And they somehow make it work. Hell, they prefer melee anyway. There is honor in it. They may not have the best tech, or the best tactics, or really the best coordination now that I think about it, but what do they have that makes them actually good? Monsters. They have a level of ferocity that is not really matched by any of the other factions. They are going to shoot you with an arrow of bone so powerful that it will split you in half, and your friends nearby will be cursed forever, and that's the type of damage that they tend to deal out, and we don't truly understand how most of it works. You see, these fuckers have monsters that tower over the battlefield, and I know I said that a bullet is the universal equalizer, and it does work, but you are going to have to be realistic here. Your silly bolt-action rifles are not going to do much, if anything, to like a desecrated saint or a praetor. You need a cannon, heavy artillery, or something a lot more stronger than that. That's kind of what the court has. They have specially crafted dudes that, although what they have is not the best, the dudes themselves are stronger and more resilient than any of the faithful. Well, unless you count the weird biomutant monsters that come from the Sultanate, but whatever. I'd love to see a pit locust fight a line of Jabir, just saying. But regardless, these creatures often provide aid to the heretic legions, while also having their own agendas, mostly sticking to themselves for private missions. This leads us to the last major faction to know about in this war, and the one that is both recognizable to those of you who have played 40k or Warhammer in general, while also being kind of its own thing coming out of left field. This is the cult of the Black Grail. See, there is one demon in hell who thinks he can kind of handle things better than most on his own, and he is working to prove himself correct, god damn it. So, you guys remember the Black Death? The bubonic plague that swept across Europe? Well, that exists in this universe, but instead it is like 1,000 times worse, and it is called the Black Grail. It is technically the only exemption to the rule of demons setting foot on land, as the Lord of Gluttony, Beelzebub, is able to manifest his essence into this living cloud wave of disease that spreads across certain communities. This is called the Black Grail, and it is, as the kids would say, pretty goddamn bad. Basically, if you are afflicted with this living cloud of disease, and you are unwilling to be a Satanist of any kind, you usually just die, turning into a puddle of sludge, and sometimes you are brought back as a grail thrall. Think a zombie, but also a Satanist. People who willingly submit themselves to the diseases can sometimes retain some of their personality, but if they're doing it just to survive, they're often just turned into sludge with no chance of coming back. But if they truly believe in the spread of disease, gluttony, and they catch old Beale on a good day, he may embrace them and give them some form of gift. Literally, the best outcome is to become a plague knight, which they just look fucking cool as all hell. But the plague knights are walking apocalypses, by the way. They can quite literally starve an entire area, as wherever they go, the livestock drops dead, the food rots away instantly, and diseases become more well spread. Sacred insects and disease-ridden hounds infest the no man's lands where the Black Grail has swept past, and these insects can infect people, turning them into corpse guard, as well as a bunch of other infected mutations and shit. I'm going to have this be edited with a few censor bars here and there from time to time. That's kind of one of the biggest strengths of this faction, and that is that they are just so goddamn gross. The strength of this faction gameplay-wise is the fact that, one, they have marginally better tech access than the Court of the Seven-Headed Serpent, but if you know anything about Nurgle, they are inhumanly resilient with a lot of disposable bodies to throw around on the table. These thralls are a pain in the ass, and they get stronger the more of them that there are on the table, which I think fits the playstyle a lot, if you want to run a zombie horde, that is. There is a bunch of other factions, both minor and major, but we are pretty much done talking about the ones that got the most writing from a lore perspective. I think this universe is fucking astounding. I think Trench Crusade is really something special because I can see the clear influences and the pitfalls it's trying to avoid. I can see the Witchburner General and tell you that it is obviously inspired by a Space Marine, but then you look at something like the Mechanized Heavy Infantry and that the power armor does not look like anything a Space Marine would wear. It's kind of this trap that exists in wargaming where you can appeal to 40k fans or avoid them. But I think this one game literally just tries to stand on its own merits, show its influences on one hand to try and possibly bring 40k fans in, but also just stand on its own merits. I'm not gonna say who, but there is some content creator out there who had such a goddamn L take that it motivated me to make this video, and it's that Trench Crusade is just super derivative from 40k, and that's all it's supposed to be. Even though I enjoy this content creator's content, I disagree with that take so much. So I had to make this video to show you that things are pretty different. It is such a unique flavor while literally doing the exact same thing. Loyalist versus chaos, the faithful versus the heretics. But the best way to see it is that with something like the Black Grail, literally an army similar in concept, if not the same in concept to that of Nurgle, it's executed almost in a completely different way, with various different, more mist-like plagued enemies rather than just bloated carrion monsters wandering around. The vibe is different, though the kind of theme is the same. It probably makes no sense, and I sound like I'm probably a hypocrite, but like, whatever, man. I just wanted to make this video to have a little bit more people see that this shit's really good. This isn't all praise with no substance, I should say, because as it stands, every positive thing I say is not because I think that this is the second coming of Hobby Christ. I say all this with the understanding that this is literally just the jumping off point. They need to build on what they have and expand the universe for there to be a decent amount of longevity. Now, with the level of success that the Kickstarter had, I think that there's going to be a lot to push. They have expansions, they have a bunch of Black Library writers working with them, so I have a good feeling that, you know, it's going to turn out well. But only time will tell, so I'm tentatively saying this game is going to be really good, because right now I'm enjoying it. It is a very simple game system, but I do think the lore, the system, and everything lines up well. When I see the finalized rules, my opinion might change. When I see the lore flubs, I might be upset, and if the entire game gets torpedoed because they got Gav Thorpe to write something and it turns out shitty, I will be there to point and laugh just as much as everybody else. But for now, I'm enjoying the game. The entire video that I just gave you is just kind of the bare bones look at the basics of the lore, the factions, and what you absolutely need to know in order to get into the game from just, you know, a basic standpoint. So, if you think that the game is worth it from how I've described it, give it a shot. The rules are free. You can find a lot of third-party STLs to 3D print models online if you have a 3D printer, and the people at Trench Crusade even encourage it. So, if you enjoyed this video, let me know. And if you want to see more, also let me know in the comments if you want me to expand on any of the other factions, because there's so much stuff that I didn't cover. Like, there's like 20-foot tall Primarch equivalents in this called the Paladins, and they're nuts. But let me know in the comments if you want more Trench Crusade content, and what specifically you'd like to see. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me. I'm able to get these videos done and be all good to go off to LVO, which I would have never been able to do without you and without my channel members supporting me throughout this, because I got the help of my editor, Alice, to make this specific video on such short notice, and she has been a dream to work with on it. So without your help, I wouldn't have been able to do that, and I wouldn't have been able to pre-make these videos before I head off. So I really appreciate you guys supporting me, and if you want to support this content, support me, as well as support me steadily increasing the production and getting better things to put into my videos, then become a channel member today. And if you don't give a single shit about any of that and you just want bonuses, well, you get a couple extra videos a month at the highest tier, and you get videos the second they're available at the lowest tier. So there is that, if that tickles your fancy. Thanks once again for watching. Go sub to Glue Boy and watch his videos if you want more now. And before I go, hey guys at Trench Crusade, how much would I have to give you so that you could make Mammon into his own faction like the Black Grail? I mean, we only have this one image for his Cult of Greed, but it looks so fucking cool, and I know that it's a sub-faction for the Heretic Legions. I just want its own expansion. Please, I'm fucking begging you. Please, I'm begging you.